Welcome back to the hustle and welcome back to the grind, everyone. Thanks for joining in. And I want to talk today a little bit about how good people sometimes just do bad things. I mean, how do we get to this position? How do we get to this place? I've seen a lot of this. I've lived it. I know it. And a lot of times people with good intentions, good attitudes, good perspectives and outlooks on life end up going down a channel or a road that they never had intention on. I mean, there's many examples of this. And I want to dive into this idea about how people get there and how in today's society we seem to be seeing a lot more of this, where people with good, that good outlook in life end up sort of losing grip with following the straight and narrow. It's such a sad state of affairs, but there are some strong reasons I see what's going on. And I do believe that corporate America is a big part of that. I mean, use my classic example. This is minor. I got canned from a job, I move on. But I was fortunate. I was double dipping. I had my own side hustle that was making and generating revenue that I was doing in the evenings, that I was able to start building some inertia and momentum. So things weren't that desperate. But there's a lot of people that rely solely on their careers, their jobs. And when something significant happens in their life, for example, it all starts right there. All of a sudden they didn't see it coming, and their company, their corporate game, they all of a sudden, see you later, we don't need you around anymore. That can have a major impact. That can turn people's world literally upside down. And that can seriously cause a lot of stress, not just to the individual, the family, you think, the spouse, the kids. That can turn a world upside down. And it's tragic. It's tragic when a life-changing event happens, an illness, a loss of a parent, a loss of a close friend or something. These are all things that have major impacts on how it impacts and twists your skew and your attitude in life. It really can affect that. And this is happening all over. Look around. I mean, we go downtown and we see all kinds of people in disparity. I mean, we see people living under bridges. We see people living in hardship. And I often thought to myself, how did we get to this position? How did we get to this place? Like, let me give you an example. I was down on White Ave here. Anybody who lives locally can appreciate, they know where White Ave is. It's a hot spot. It's a busy place, lots of pubs. And it's kind of a pub community. Main drag is popular in the summer. Lots of people walking around. And it's just one of these spots that there's lots of foot traffic, fun cars, and there's all kinds of activities. Now, there's also been a lot of chaos on that street too over the years. And do you remember when the Edmonton Oilers had that playoff run many years ago, and people were looting and breaking windows and climbing on street signs, and they had police lined up? That was an absolute bananas year. But that was White Ave, you see, because it brings everybody together. There's all kinds of fairs and festivals throughout the summer. It's a very popular spot. But you know what? White Ave is just one of those places that tends to bring all kinds of different people to the table. And the reality is, what I found is, and one time I was down on White Ave. I was hanging around. My wife went into the store. She went into Winners, do some shopping around. That's like the Ross if you're in the US or American. Same idea. She went inside, and I was standing on the sidewalk waiting. She was inside shopping. I was just hanging out. The sun was shining, watching fun cars, a Ferrari driving by, some cool cars. And while I was standing out there, there's this young guy, looked really strung out, clearly rough shape. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey buddy, you got some spare change? You got some extra couple bucks? I need to get to the Y. I'm staying at the YMCA. I need something. I gotta eat. I'm just dying over here." And he looked rough. Okay. I mean, we all see it. Try San Francisco, you'll appreciate it. You know what I'm talking about. And there's more and more of these unfortunate folks everywhere across our society. We're seeing it all the time. But I said, "Look, so buddy, I don't have any money. I do apologize. I'd love to help you out. If I could slip you a $10 bill or something, I would. I don't usually carry a lot of change with me." So I had to decline. But I said, "But hang on." I said, how did you get here? How did you get to this place in life? Like, seriously, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I was genuinely interested in trying to understand how this individual got to this position. And so he kind of perked up. It was quite interesting. We ended up chatting for about 20, 25 minutes. And he started out, he said, he had a scholarship. He was in competitive basketball and swimming. He actually had a very bright future. He came from a solid family, although there was a little bit of abuse, it sounded like, somewhere along the way in his family. Somewhere, he didn't get into that detail. But he said generally he grew up like most people, sports, friends, school, and kind of lived the life like most people do. But then he got in with the wrong crowd. Then he started getting into the DRUGS. We know all about that. I mean, that seems to be a lot of that afflicting a lot of society today. And he got into that world. And then he got, obviously, to a place where he needed it. And he started doing things that started compromising his own safety. He actually even said that he was basically held against his own will, if you will, for a short period of time, and they did things to him that weren't good. It was absolutely eye-opening. My jaw dropped. And my son was with me, who was listening to this, and we looked at each other, and I literally, for the life of me, could not get over the type of calamities that this gentleman was dealing with. There's things that people deal with that you could not even imagine. And he was sharing some of this, and I literally was truly at a loss for words. I had no other way to, I had nothing I could even rebut. I said, I really, really feel for you. And I just, all I could do was give him some words of encouragement and say, look, it sounds like you're on the upswing. He was on some weaning, some kind of medication to help him kind of get off of some of these things, these dependents. And it sounded like he was trying to make a move in the right direction. And all I could do was really coach him into, try to clean up. There's a bright future ahead of you. You're young. There's lots of opportunities. There's jobs out there. You just got to want to do it. You can do it. And I really tried to coach him because I saw a glimmer of hope in this kid's eyes. And I just could not, for the life of me, not have something encouraging to say to this kid. So that's an example of how we sometimes just don't even realize what makes people tick, and how people sometimes get to the place that they do. It's easy just to draw an assumption and say, wow, those people they're bad, they're nasty, they do these things. And granted, there are some truly evil people out there. There really are. And I do believe there's some that really can't be fixed. But I also believe that there's a lot that can. And I think there's a lot of people that just they get into this whirlwind of chaos, disruption, and bad place in their life, and it seems hard to back their way out of that. Okay, so, that's one example. You see homelessness all over the place. Now, we see other things. And I'll speak to Canadian, US, you guys are going through a lot of the same thing in the Americans, and certainly in Europe, and I see in UK, it's tragic, and please inform me. I'd like to hear more about this. I'm not super well educated on what's going on in the United Kingdom or England or any of that, but I do hear all kinds of conflict with cost of living and not allowed to burn wood, and they're really squeezing the middle class to try to somehow survive with high taxation, and even just finding more interesting, innovative ways to survive and stay warm through winter with the cost of living and the crime, and it sounds like it's absolute tragedy. The US, lots of hot spots there too. Look at San Francisco. There's a lot of tough areas going through a lot of tough times, and a lot of it is a derivative of, inflation, cost of living. People can't afford to live anymore, and when people get desperate, they start to do things that they maybe wouldn't have done years earlier. People often have good intentions. We are all grown, we're all born with the same perspective. We pop out on the hospital bed, and we're basically all, more or less, most of us have a relatively clean slate, and we all have more or less the same attitude. It's how we adapt, how we, some of the opportunities, and certainly our experiences on life, and how we move and navigate through life. And unfortunately, there are some people that have some serious benefits. Some are born with the silver spoon, and There's other people that do gain benefits, through life, or they're born into rich families. But generally, for the most part, most people kind of start with starting at point zero with the attitudes and perspectives on life. And we develop those over time. And our experiences are, I truly believe this, we're a product of our environment, okay? And it's those things that sort of, create those attitudes that we have. I developed some of the attitudes and perspectives about the corporate world, not in my first year, 2 years, 5 years. I would say even the first 10 years, life was grand. But when things start getting bad, and you're on the receiving end of isolation, exclusion, performance talks, unfair treatment, I mean, the list goes on. When you're on the back end of that stuff, then you start to realize, wait a minute, it's not quite really what I signed up for. But neither is cost of living. And a lot of people right now, and if you're from Canada, you can appreciate Loblaws. Loblaws, one of the biggest grocery vendors here in Canada, has been greasing customers and buyers and people like you and I just trying to make a living. And, most of us don't have a ton of money. So a couple of areas that have really grinded out a lot of people in the last few years. Again, inflation has impacted everybody. From everything you buy, from gas to food to housing to clothes to cars, everything has gone up drastically. And in most cases, even if people are getting raises, it wasn't nearly enough to make up for all these increases across the board. Then on top of it, we have taxation that's been getting cranked up. And I've seen that both on the US, Canadian side. We see it in the UK. We see it across the globe. This isn't really a global issue for the most part. And that's why this seems to be a global problem with a lot of mental health challenges that people are contending with. Okay? And it's forcing people to make hard decisions. Okay, initially, people start dropping the non-essentials, right? Okay, I don't need that new car. Great, cars are getting too expensive. Don't need that. Can walk away from that. I don't need to spend on a car right now. Okay, but then we saw housing prices creep up and rent creep up. $2,000, $2,500 for a single bedroom or bachelor suite in Toronto and Vancouver. Who could afford that? So now it pushes people out or into cheaper markets. Then they got to move, and there's those expenses associated with that. Okay. Then, of course, you have companies like Loblaws, which I just described, who try to justify in all their infinite wisdom that they're not making money, they're making only margins. But then here, everybody knows that's just noise. The corporate world is cleaning everybody's wallet out. And this is what's been happening. And it drives people to a very, very stressful place where, okay, first they have to give up the car, or even possibly drive without insurance, because I've heard of a lot of cases now, people without insurance is on the rise because insurance costs are rising, gas costs are rising, cars are rising. So all those things are non-essentials for the most part. People just walk away from that. But then people can't afford to buy food, so they start skipping meals. The kids don't get groceries. The kids maybe don't get medicine when they need it. You can't get health care because the healthcare system's upside down right now. People can't afford to rent. Next thing you know, more and more people are living on the street. And we're seeing this every single day. It's so heartbreaking. But there's some people that just fall into this pit, the pit of despair, and they wallow up. And I've seen way too many cases where people they become passive about it and they just sort of drift off. And you can only imagine where they drift off to. There's various ways, various places. And I hate to talk about this in such a morose fashion, but this story actually has a point, okay? And I'm going to get to this point. People that have a little fight in them, they don't want to give up hope. They don't want to give up on the future. They don't want to give up on their family, their kids, their wife. They don't want to give up. They keep fighting, and they try to find ways, and they try to carve on and try to make a path for themselves. Those people now, unfortunately, have some fight in them. Well, that's fortunately they do. The The unfortunate part is sometimes that creates this desperate position. Put that into somebody who's got a little fight and spirit, and now we've got a recipe for some desperation. We're seeing it all over. We're seeing crime on the rise. We're seeing break-ins, car thefts, vehicles in Ontario, Montreal, down east. They're getting jacked in the middle of the night, ripped right off of people's driveways in the middle of the day, middle of the night. And they're not even ripping license plates off. They're breaking into people's homes in the middle of the night. And things are just getting bad. And it's a lot of formed from desperation. Cost of living. People don't have the money. They're taxed to the hilt. They can't afford food. They can't afford rent anymore in a lot of cases. A lot of people, they're not doing it so they can buy their new BMW. They're doing it because there's a survival instinct kicking in, and it's kicking in swift and hard. Okay. So here we are. A classic example. Have you heard the latest news? United Healthcare. And I don't want to get in the game of, we're late stage capitalism. It's not about this. This is just a human thing. This is a human factor. It's just empathy. It's having care and compassion for fellow humans. And these corporations just don't seem to care. The Loblaws crank up grocery prices even when they're making record profits. Stellantis massively cranking up prices on their vehicles, even though they're not even selling cars. They still somehow feel compelled that they're justified in doing so. The company that a lot of us get walked out, get our walking papers. Same story there. This is all kind of leading people to do desperate things, okay? And now with this United Healthcare, everybody heard about the CEO heading off to a meeting 7 o'clock in the morning, and that would be the last trip that, unfortunately for him, he would walk down that same sidewalk, because somebody felt compelled to take action. And well, we know the rest, and I don't need to paint the picture. This is really no point. The point is, whether it's justified or not, and it's never justified in my perspective, and we should never feel that that's the solution. But what this represents is not a solution, because that's absolute tragedy at every angle and every perspective possible. That is absolutely horrifying to hear that those types of things can actually happen. When you think about, we consider ourselves a civilized civilization. There is an unfortunate reality that desperation is starting to rip and tear at people in a way that we haven't seen in so long. And so now we have a situation, and they're still looking for the person. They're on the run. But we can only imagine, allegedly, that healthcare insurance company was the worst in terms of rejecting healthcare claims. I mean, people aren't going in there trying to claim healthcare because they want to, because they're trying to buy that new BMW. They're doing it because somebody's sick, whether they're sick or their mother, or somebody's got cancer, somebody's dealing with some chronic health problems, and they're trying to deal with that, and they're trying to reach out and get some of that money and support from these insurance companies, largely that they've been paying into. But the word has it, that particular company has a rejection rate of as much as 33%, which is at least 50% more than the next one in line. And I've seen the charts and the graphs, and you can look that up online, and I'm not here to debate. Who cares? It's a numbers game. The point is, I think what we're starting to see is desperation at a level that is off the charts. People are finally starting to their backs are broken. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. And I mean, we all feel that level of desperation. We all have those own, our own level of, where we feel that we're truly triggered to break. Mental health breakdown, just a mental health crisis. everybody has their own place. Most people never get anywhere near that. But it's so tragic when I hear that things get to that point. And it's just saddens me to all levels. But I can truly appreciate the level of desperation that people get when, they're sad and they're trying to rip off a chocolate bar from the store. Never in my wildest dreams could ever anybody justify, even at the simplest level, walking in and taking a chocolate bar off the shelf. That's illegal. That's a law. It's criminal, right? The other day I was in the dollar store. Okay. I was in the dollar store. And it was cold out. And I mean, it was cold. Here, you guys seen what it's been like here for weather. I mean, it was about minus 22 that night. And I went in the dollar store and we were picking up a couple things. We were getting some gift wrapping stuff for Christmas and getting ready for that. Me and my wife and a couple of my kids, we went to the dollar store. And as we were coming in on the outdoor, there was a younger person. They clearly looked like they were hard done by too, and they weren't in a good spot. They were, you could clear, they were down. Their clothes were pretty ragged looking. Things were looking pretty rough. And they had a backpack, and there was a security person trying to rip the backpack out of their hands. And then as they kind of tore the backpack open, we saw this person said, no. They were freaking out and getting very, very, I don't know how I can say this, but they were quite upset, quite distressed. But the security person ripped the backpack open. And what did they find in there? A toque, a set of wool mittens, and a package of juice. They're not trying, this isn't for monetary means. This isn't for monetary gains. These people weren't trying to get rich. They were surviving. These are examples of the things that people are trying to do just to stay alive today. And it's so tragic, and it really burns me to the core to hear when people have to take it to this level and this degree. And that's all I'm saying. You know what? We're in a society today where we've never been challenged, taxed so heavy financially, but taxed so heavily on our mental health as well. And we're seeing good people in so many cases doing, by most measures, bad things. And I don't know where this begins. I don't know where this ends. But it's not a very good situation, and certainly it's quite tragic. I don't know, everybody. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please do drop a line. I'm not trying to be political, but this is part of life, and these are the things and the challenges that we have to overcome sometimes, and the things that we think about, that we see, that we experience, and that we witness are unfortunately a reality of today's life. So anyway, thanks again, everybody. I do appreciate your time. And as always, please do drop a line. Please do drop a comment down there. I feel like this one's really, really a tragic story in every way. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.